There is a version of your life that has been waiting for you to feel ready, and somehow that moment never quite arrives. Most people who delay action don't think of themselves as stuck. They think of themselves as preparing. They're reading more, thinking more, gathering more information. They're waiting until the picture is clearer, until the timing is better, until they feel more confident about what to do next. And on the surface, this looks like intelligence. It looks like caution. It looks like the kind of deliberate, careful thinking that serious people do before making serious decisions. But if you look more closely at what's actually happening, not at the behavior, but at the internal experience behind it, something different emerges. There's a quiet discomfort, a low-level unease that appears whenever you think about moving forward. Not a fear of failing exactly, something subtler. Something more like the discomfort of not knowing how things will unfold. And almost without realizing it, the mind begins to treat that discomfort as a signal that says, "Not yet. Wait. You don't know enough yet." This is where the delay actually begins. The common assumption is that people delay action because they're lazy or undisciplined or afraid of failure in some obvious, nameable way. And sometimes that's true. But for a large number of people, thoughtful people, people who genuinely want to move forward, the delay doesn't come from laziness. It comes from something that feels, in the moment, like wisdom. It sounds like this: I want to make sure I'm making the right decision. I'll start once I understand it better. I just need a little more time to think it through. These aren't the thoughts of someone who doesn't care. They're the thoughts of someone who is very carefully managing their discomfort. Because what each of these statements has in common is a single underlying belief that action should come after certainty, that you should know before you go, that moving into the unknown is something to be avoided until the unknown becomes a little more known. And this belief feels completely reasonable. That's what makes it so difficult to see past. Here's what's actually happening inside the brain. The brain is, in the most fundamental sense, a prediction machine. Its primary function, before language, before reason, before creativity, is to model the future. It is constantly generating simulations of what is about to happen, and it is constantly updating those simulations based on what it senses and experiences. This works beautifully when the future is clear, when the environment is familiar, when the outcome is known, when the path has been walked before. But when the future is genuinely uncertain, when you're considering something you've never done or a decision with no guaranteed outcome, the brain's prediction system runs into a problem. It cannot generate a reliable model, and this gap between what it expects to know and what it actually knows produces a kind of error signal. And in the context of uncertain action, that error signal doesn't feel like a data update. It feels like discomfort. It feels like something is wrong, and so the mind does what it has been shaped to do when something feels wrong. It pauses, it seeks more information, it waits for the signal to resolve. This is not a character flaw. This is how the nervous system was designed. The brain has a strong bias toward known outcomes over unknown ones, even when the unknown outcome is objectively better. Given two options with the same expected result, people will consistently choose the one where the outcome is more predictable, not because it's better, but because the uncertainty itself is unpleasant. And when action requires stepping into genuine uncertainty, uncertainty about outcomes, about how you'll perform, about whether it was the right choice, the mind doesn't just feel hesitant, it finds reasons to wait. Good reasons, thoughtful-sounding reasons, reasons that keep it exactly where it is. Psychologists have a name for the underlying pattern. They call it intolerance of uncertainty, the tendency to experience ambiguous situations as threatening, not because the situation is dangerous, but because the absence of a clear prediction is, to the nervous system, something that feels like an alarm. The mind isn't waiting because it needs more information. It's waiting because uncertainty is uncomfortable, and waiting reduces that discomfort, at least for now. And this is exactly where the misunderstanding hides. People experience the discomfort of uncertainty and interpret it as a message about readiness. They think, I feel uncertain, therefore I am not yet ready. But those are not the same thing. Not feeling ready is a sensation. It is not a fact about the world. It is not an accurate measurement of whether you have enough to proceed. It is the brain generating an alarm in response to a future it cannot fully simulate. And here's the part that changes things. Most of the uncertainty you're waiting to resolve cannot be resolved in advance. The kind of clarity you're looking for about whether this will work, about what it will feel like on the other side, about whether you're making the right call, that clarity doesn't exist before the action. It only exists after it. Waiting for that certainty isn't preparation, it's postponement. This reframes the problem almost entirely, because the question stops being, do I know enough to act, and becomes something much simpler. Am I waiting for information that will actually change my decision, or am I waiting because waiting feels safer? Those are very different things. So what does it look like to work with this rather than against it? The first shift is learning to recognize the feeling of uncertainty as separate from the question of readiness. When you sense that low-level discomfort, that vague not yet feeling, you can begin to observe it without automatically treating it as instruction. It is a signal from a system that prefers the known. It is not a verdict on your situation. The second shift is learning to ask a more precise question when you feel the pull to gather more. Not do I know enough, but will knowing more actually change what I do? There's a difference between information that genuinely updates your understanding and information that simply occupies the gap where anxiety lives. Most of what we search for when we feel uncertain falls into the second category. We are not building knowledge, we are managing discomfort by staying busy. The third shift is the recognition that action and certainty do not have to be sequential, that you do not have to understand the full path before taking the first step. The purpose of early action, imperfect, uncertain, incomplete, is not to produce a guaranteed outcome. It is to generate real information, the kind that cannot exist before the attempt. You are not waiting until the picture becomes clear. You are painting the picture by moving forward. The fourth shift, perhaps the quietest one, is a change in how you hold the relationship between certainty and time. The mind frames certainty as something that arrives before you act, something that signals permission. But in most things that matter, certainty is not a permission slip. It is what accumulates slowly through experience, through iteration, through showing up before you feel entirely ready. The readiness you're waiting for isn't coming to find you. You encounter it by moving towards it. There is a kind of patience that looks like wisdom but is actually protection. The mind learns to dress avoidance in careful language. It learns to disguise the need for comfort as the practice of diligence, and the longer this goes on, the more natural it feels, until the waiting itself becomes the default mode and the life you were preparing for remains perfectly, indefinitely ahead of you. The brain will always prefer to know, but most of what is worth doing cannot be fully known from a distance. At some point, the most honest thing you can say to yourself is not, I'm not ready yet. It's, I'm uncertain and I'm going to move anyway. That sentence won't feel dramatic when it happens. It will feel quiet. And that is exactly what it should feel like.